A millionaire disguised himself as poor and went to a dealership to buy a luxury car, but what happened surprised everyone. Hello, welcome. Enjoy, subscribe, and turn on notifications. John Carter was a man of striking presence. His dark skin contrasted with the quiet brilliance of his sharp eyes, which seemed to take in every detail around him. As the owner of one of the largest tech companies in the world, John had built his fortune through hard work and vision, overcoming barriers that only he truly understood. Despite his fame, he valued humility and fairness above any display of wealth. That morning, John decided to conduct an experiment he had been planning for months. He put on a pair of worn jeans, a plain shirt, and shoes that had clearly seen better days. With no sign of extravagance, he got into his old car, a 20-year-old model he kept more for sentimental reasons than necessity, and drove to the most luxurious car dealership in the city, known for catering exclusively to the elite. As soon as he parked, he could feel the weight of the staff's eyes on him, like an invisible wave of judgment. John, however, remained calm. He knew exactly what he was doing. The dealership's showroom was grand. Polished marble floors gleamed under the natural light streaming through the glass walls, and luxury cars stood like jewels under carefully placed spotlights. Everything about the space screamed exclusivity and wealth. The soft hum of jazz music filled the air, adding an extra layer of sophistication. As John walked toward the reception desk, he noticed some of the salespeople giving him quick up-and-down glances. One of them raised an eyebrow, his expression almost dismissive. Another crossed his arms and leaned casually against a marble column, smirking slightly. Their reactions made it clear, they had already judged him. Emma, the receptionist, stood behind the desk, organizing some papers. She was a young woman with a warm smile and a genuine demeanor that seemed to light up the space around her. Unlike the others, she didn't seem to judge him. As soon as she saw John approach, she looked up and greeted him enthusiastically. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" The softness in her voice and the absence of prejudice in her attitude were an unexpected relief. John smiled back and explained that he was interested in exploring the dealership's most luxurious models. Emma didn't hesitate. She picked up a tablet, prepared a quick presentation, and pointed to where the cars were displayed. "I can call one of our consultants to assist you with the details of each model if you'd like," she said. John thanked her and waited as Emma called a salesperson. During the brief moment of waiting, he scanned the other staff in the showroom. Some didn't even try to hide their disdain. One salesperson whispered something to a colleague, both chuckling softly. Their laughter faded quickly as John's calm, observant gaze met theirs. When the salesperson finally arrived, his expression was one of pure indifference. He carried himself with the air of someone used to dealing only with high-profile clients, and John, in his plain attire, clearly didn't fit the image. "So, what type of vehicle are you looking for?" he asked, his tone skeptical and almost mocking. John responded calmly, explaining that he wanted to see the dealership's most exclusive model. The salesperson hesitated, his eyes narrowing as if trying to calculate the likelihood of John wasting his time. "Are you sure? Maybe we should start with something more affordable," the salesperson suggested, his smile forced and insincere. Before John could respond, Emma, who had been listening, stepped in. "The customer requested the exclusive model. It would be my pleasure to show it to him. Shall we go, Mr. Carter?" Emma's firm yet respectful tone surprised not only the salesperson but also John. He accepted her offer, and the two walked toward the desired car. Emma, without realizing it, had just shown John that even in the midst of prejudice, there were still people who could see beyond appearances. As Emma guided John to the dealership's most exclusive vehicle, a sleek, obsidian black luxury sedan, the atmosphere in the showroom seemed to shift. The other staff, sensing something unusual, discreetly followed the pair with their eyes. Some whispered to one another, their curiosity barely concealed. Emma stopped by the car and gestured toward it with a proud smile. "This is our top model, sir." It's equipped with advanced features, including a fully autonomous driving system and handcrafted interiors made from sustainable materials. Would you like to take a closer look inside? John nodded, and Emma opened the door for him with a smooth, practiced motion. The smell of premium leather filled the air, and the sunlight streaming through the glass walls reflected off the chrome details inside the car. John took his time, running his hand over the dashboard and inspecting the controls. "This is impressive," John remarked, his tone neutral, but his eyes scanned every detail with the precision of someone who knew exactly what he was looking for. Behind them, the salesperson who had initially hesitated stood awkwardly, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He watched Emma engage with John, her professionalism unshaken despite the judgmental murmurs from some of her colleagues nearby. "Would you like me to explain the financing options?" the salesperson finally interjected, his voice tinged with impatience. John glanced at him briefly, then turned back to Emma. "Actually, I'd like to test drive it. Can that be arranged?" Emma responded without hesitation. "Of course, sir. I'll check with our manager to get everything set up for you. It might take a few minutes, please make yourself comfortable." John nodded, his expression calm but unreadable. As Emma walked toward the manager's office, he remained by the car, silently observing the staff around him. The judgmental stares, the subtle smirks, the whispered conversations, they didn't escape his notice. A nearby salesperson whispered loudly enough for John to hear, "Why is she wasting her time? He probably can't even afford the down payment on the cheapest model." John turned his head slightly, his sharp eyes locking on the man who had spoken. The salesperson froze, suddenly aware that his words had been overheard. John said nothing, letting the weight of his gaze do the talking. The man quickly turned away, pretending to busy himself with a clipboard. Minutes later, Emma returned, her steps confident and her smile as warm as ever. "Everything is ready for the test drive, Mr. Carter. Shall we?" John smiled back, his respect for her growing. "Lead the way." As Emma guided him toward the exit where the car had been brought around, the manager of the dealership approached. A middle-aged man with an air of authority, he extended his hand toward John with a polite but rehearsed smile. "Mr. Carter, is it? Welcome. I understand you're interested in our flagship model," the manager said, his tone smooth but lacking genuine warmth. John shook his hand firmly. "I am. Emma has been very helpful so far." The manager glanced at Emma briefly, his expression difficult to read, before returning his attention to John. "That's wonderful to hear. Please let us know if there's anything we can do to enhance your experience." John smiled faintly. "Thank you. For now, I'd like to see how this car performs on the road." As John got into the driver's seat and Emma joined him as the passenger, the manager stepped back, watching them leave the dealership lot. The staff gathered near the windows, still murmuring among themselves, speculating about who this man really was and why he was being treated like a VIP despite his modest appearance. The test drive began smoothly, with John navigating the city streets effortlessly. He asked thoughtful questions about the car's features, from its performance to its safety systems. Emma answered each one with confidence and a deep understanding of the product, impressing John further. At one point, as they stopped at a traffic light, John glanced at Emma. "You're very good at what you do. Do you enjoy working here?" Emma hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "I do. I've always loved cars and meeting new people. It's a challenging environment sometimes, but I believe in treating everyone the way I'd want to be treated." John nodded, his respect for her solidifying further. The light turned green, and the car glided forward effortlessly. As they returned to the dealership, John's mind was already formulating his next move. As John parked the sleek sedan back at the dealership, the staff's eyes were glued to him through the expansive glass windows. The car, pristine and silent, gleamed under the sunlight as John stepped out with an air of composure. Emma followed, maintaining her professionalism despite the obvious tension lingering in the atmosphere. The manager was waiting by the entrance, flanked by two salespeople who seemed eager to redeem themselves after their earlier behavior. His polished smile grew as John approached. "How was the test drive, Mr. Carter? Did the car meet your expectations?" John nodded, his expression calm but unreadable. "It's an excellent vehicle. Handles well, impeccable craftsmanship." The manager beamed. "We're delighted to hear that. Shall we discuss the purchase options in my office?" John paused, taking a deliberate moment to glance around the showroom. The murmurs among the staff had ceased, but their watchful eyes betrayed their curiosity and unease. His gaze rested briefly on Emma, who stood a step behind him, her posture confident but modest. "No," John said simply, his tone firm yet polite. The manager's smile faltered. "Oh. I see. Well, if there's anything we can do to address your concerns." "I have no concerns," John interrupted, turning to Emma. "However, I'd like to finalize the purchase with her." The silence in the showroom was palpable. The manager blinked in confusion, clearly caught off guard. "Mr. Carter, Emma is our receptionist. While she's excellent at her job, our sales team handles transactions." John's gaze hardened, the first flicker of steel in his otherwise calm demeanor. "I understand that. But Emma has been the only person here to treat me with the respect and professionalism every customer deserves. If I'm buying this car, it will be through her." The weight of his words settled over the room. Emma's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, she seemed unsure whether to step forward or stay in place. The manager, flustered, tried to regain control of the situation. "Of course, Mr. Carter. Emma can assist with the initial paperwork, and then one of our consultants will take over." "No," John repeated, his voice unwavering. "Emma will handle the entire process. If that's a problem, I'll take my business elsewhere." The statement landed like a thunderclap. The murmurs that had subsided now returned in hushed waves. The manager, realizing he had little choice, forced a smile. "Very well, Mr. Carter. Emma, if you'd be so kind, please assist our esteemed client." Emma stepped forward, her composure intact despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. "Of course. Right this way, Mr. Carter." She led him to a private office, away from the prying eyes of the showroom staff. Once inside, she began preparing the necessary paperwork, her hands steady but her thoughts racing. "Thank you for trusting me with this, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice calm but tinged with sincerity. John leaned back in his chair, his sharp eyes studying her. "Emma, let me ask you something. How long have you worked here?" "Almost 3 years," she replied, meeting his gaze. "And in those 3 years, how often have you seen people treated the way I was when I first walked in today?" Emma hesitated, her professionalism clashing with her instinct for honesty. Finally, she said, "More often than I'd like to admit. It's something I try to counter in my own way, but it's not always easy." John nodded, as if expecting her answer. "And if you had the chance to change things? To create a culture where respect and professionalism were the standard, not the exception, would you take it?" Emma blinked, the weight of the question catching her off guard. "Of course I would. But, that's not really within my power." John's faint smile suggested otherwise. "We'll see about that." They continued with the transaction, Emma guiding John through each step with efficiency and clarity. As they finished, John handed over his payment in full, an action that sent shockwaves through the dealership when the news reached the staff. As Emma finalized the deal, John stood and extended his hand. "Thank you, Emma. This was one of the best experiences I've had as a customer, not because of the product, but because of how you treated me." Emma shook his hand, her gratitude evident but tempered by professionalism. "It was my pleasure, Mr. Carter." John lingered for a moment before speaking again. This isn't the last you'll hear from me. I'll be in touch soon." With that, he walked out of the office, leaving Emma with a mix of pride and uncertainty. Back in the showroom, the staff was abuzz with speculation as John exited the dealership in his newly purchased car. Emma watched from the office window, a quiet determination settling in her heart. She didn't know what John had planned, but something told her this was only the beginning. The air inside the dealership felt heavier after John Carter left. His departure had left an undeniable ripple, one that the staff couldn't quite ignore. Emma returned to her desk, her usual composure masking the whirlwind of thoughts inside her. The eyes of her colleagues followed her every move, curiosity and unease etched onto their faces. By mid-afternoon, the manager called Emma into his office. The room, with its large desk and shelves lined with awards and plaques, felt unusually stifling. The manager, Mr. Hughes, sat behind the desk, his hands clasped in front of him. His polished demeanor was still intact, but there was a faint undercurrent of tension in his voice. "Emma," he began, gesturing for her to sit. "I wanted to commend you on how you handled Mr. Carter's transaction today. He seems to have taken quite a liking to you." Emma nodded politely. "Thank you, Mr. Hughes. I just did my job." "Yes, of course," he replied, leaning back in his chair. "But I must say, it's not every day a client of his stature insists on dealing with someone in your position." Emma felt the words hang in the air, their implications clear. "With all due respect, Mr. Hughes, I believe Mr. Carter valued being treated with respect. That's something we should all strive to offer, regardless of a customer's appearance." Hughes studied her for a moment, his expression carefully neutral. "That's admirable, Emma. And while I appreciate your dedication, I hope you understand the importance of teamwork in this business. We rely on our sales team to close deals, and today's situation was unconventional, to say the least." Emma held his gaze, her voice steady. "Understood, sir. But in this case, Mr. Carter made his preferences clear." Hughes nodded slowly, his lips pressing into a thin line. "Indeed, he did. Well, I'll leave it at that for now. You may go." As Emma left the office, her colleagues whispered amongst themselves. Some congratulated her in passing, their smiles faintly laced with envy. Others avoided her altogether, their expressions betraying a mix of resentment and confusion. The day dragged on, but Emma remained focused, her thoughts drifting back to John's parting words, "This isn't the last you'll hear from me." When her shift finally ended, she stepped out into the cool evening air, feeling the weight of the day settle on her shoulders. She barely had time to reach her car before her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with an unknown number. "Hello," she answered cautiously. "Emma," came a familiar voice. It was John. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "No, not at all," she replied, her curiosity piqued. "What can I do for you, Mr. Carter?" "First, call me John. Second, I'd like to meet with you tomorrow. Somewhere outside the dealership. There's something important I'd like to discuss." Emma hesitated, the unexpected request catching her off guard. "May I ask what this is about?" "You'll understand when we talk. Let's just say it involves an opportunity one think you'll find interesting." The line went silent for a moment, and then John added, "Of course, you're free to decline. But I think you'll want to hear what I have to say." Emma considered his words, the memory of his calm authority and piercing gaze flashing through her mind. "All right, John. Where should we meet?" He gave her the details of a small cafe downtown, far from the polished facade of the dealership. "I'll see you there at 10 a.m., he said before hanging up. Emma stared at her phone for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling in. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever John wanted to discuss could be the start of something far bigger than she had anticipated. That night, as she prepared for bed, her thoughts raced. Was this about the dealership? A new job? Or perhaps something even more unexpected? The next morning, Emma arrived at the cafe a few minutes early, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and nerves. She found a quiet table by the window and ordered a coffee, her eyes darting toward the entrance every time the door opened. At precisely 10 a.m., John walked in. Dressed sharply but still understated, he exuded the same calm confidence that had unsettled the dealership staff the day before. Spotting her, he smiled and approached the table. "Good morning, Emma," he said, taking a seat across from her. "Good morning, John," she replied, trying to match his composed demeanor. "I'm curious to hear what this is about." John leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. "I'll get straight to the point. Yesterday wasn't just about buying a car. It was about observing, understanding, and assessing." Emma frowned slightly. "Assessing what?" "The culture of that dealership," John replied. "And by extension, the kind of environment many businesses create when they prioritize profit over respect." She listened intently as he continued, his tone measured yet passionate. "I've seen it happen too many times, Emma. Companies lose sight of the people who make them successful, customers and employees alike. But yesterday, you reminded me that individuals can still make a difference. You stood out because of your principles, your professionalism, and your ability to treat everyone with dignity." Emma felt a flush of pride but remained cautious. "I appreciate that, John. But what does this have to do with me?" He smiled. "I want you to help me change things. Not just at that dealership, but on a much larger scale." Emma stared at John, her coffee untouched. His words hung in the air, heavy with possibilities she hadn't yet fully grasped. "Change things," she repeated, her tone a mix of curiosity and disbelief. "What exactly do you mean by that?" John leaned back in his chair, folding his hands on the table. His gaze was steady, his expression thoughtful. "Emma, I didn't tell you this yesterday, but I'm not just a businessman, I'm an advocate for systemic change. Over the years, I've watched as businesses across industries forget the most fundamental aspect of their success: people. Employees, customers, communities, all of them are treated as numbers instead of individuals. That's why I created a foundation focused on transforming workplace cultures." Emma listened intently, her mind racing to keep up with the weight of what he was saying. "Yesterday," John continued, "I walked into that dealership looking like any other customer. My goal was to observe how I'd be treated, how the staff would react, and who among them would rise above expectations. And you, Emma, you were the exception. You stood out not because of what you said, but because of how you acted. That's the kind of leadership I'm looking for." Emma blinked, caught between pride and disbelief. "Leadership?" John nodded. "Yes. I want to bring you on board as part of my foundation. Your role would be to develop and implement training programs for businesses like that dealership, programs that emphasize empathy, respect, and professionalism. I believe you have the qualities needed to make a real impact." The cafe bustled around them, but Emma felt as if the world had gone silent. She tried to process what he was offering, her thoughts swirling with doubt and excitement. I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. "This is all so sudden." John smiled, his expression softening. "I understand. It's a lot to take in. But think about this, the way you handled yourself yesterday made a difference, not just to me, but to everyone who saw it. Imagine what you could do if you had the tools and resources to amplify that impact on a much larger scale." Emma hesitated, her fingers lightly gripping the edge of the table. "John, I'm just a receptionist. I've never managed a team or led a project. I wouldn't even know where to begin." John's eyes sparkled with a quiet determination. "You underestimate yourself, Emma. What you did yesterday showed leadership, courage, and integrity. Those are things that can't be taught, they come from within. Everything else? That's where I come in. My team and I will provide the training and support you need. You won't be doing this alone. Emma's mind swirled with questions. What would this mean for her career? Could she really leave the stability of her current job for something so uncertain yet exciting? What about the dealership? She asked after a moment. If I leave, won't it feel like I'm abandoning the place where I've worked so hard to make a difference? John tilted his head slightly, his voice measured. Sometimes, the best way to create change is to step outside and gain the perspective and influence needed to make a greater impact. You can't save a forest if you're stuck trimming a single tree. Emma bit her lip, his words hitting harder than she expected. I won't pressure you, John added. This is a decision only you can make. But I'll tell you this, opportunities like this don't come often. You have a chance to do something extraordinary, Emma. Something that could change lives. She looked down at her coffee, now cold, and took a deep breath. I'll need time to think about it, she said finally. John nodded, his smile reassuring. Take all the time you need. Here's my card. Call me when you're ready to discuss further. He slid a sleek business card across the table. Emma picked it up, her thumb brushing over the embossed lettering. As they stood to leave, John extended his hand. Whatever you decide, Emma, know that you've already made a difference. Not many people can say that. Emma shook his hand, her grip firm despite the uncertainty in her heart. Thank you, John. For believing in me. John smiled, a gesture full of quiet confidence. You've earned it. As Emma walked out of the cafe and into the crisp morning air, her thoughts were a whirlwind of possibilities. Could she really take this leap into the unknown? The card in her hand felt heavier than it should, a symbol of a choice that could redefine her future. The decision wasn't just about her, it was about the kind of person she wanted to be and the legacy she wanted to leave behind. The walk home felt longer than usual for Emma. Each step seemed to echo the weight of John's offer in her mind. The card in her hand, now tucked carefully into her bag, felt like a ticking clock, counting down the time she had to make a decision that could change everything. Her apartment, a modest but cozy space on the edge of downtown, greeted her with its familiar warmth. She set her bag on the kitchen counter and stared out the window, watching the city hum with life. The coffee maker gurgled quietly as she brewed a fresh cup, hoping the routine task would calm her racing thoughts. Sitting at the small table near the window, she pulled John's card from her bag. The embossed logo gleamed under the soft light. Below his name, the title read, Founder, Carter Foundation for Corporate Integrity. She sighed, setting the card down and burying her face in her hands. The words from their conversation replayed in her mind, each one stirring a mix of excitement and doubt. Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a text from her best friend, Lisa. Lunch tomorrow. Need to catch up. Emma stared at the screen for a moment before typing back. Yes. I have something big to talk about. Lisa's reply came instantly. Can't wait. Same spot at noon. Emma smiled faintly, her first real smile since leaving the cafe. At least she wouldn't have to navigate this decision alone. The next day, Emma arrived at their usual lunch spot, a quaint diner with red leather booths and the faint aroma of freshly baked bread. Lisa was already there, sipping iced tea and scrolling through her phone. Hey, you. Lisa said with a bright smile as Emma slid into the seat across from her. What's this big thing you need to talk about? Emma hesitated, fiddling with the corner of her menu. You're not going to believe this. Lisa leaned in, her curiosity piqued. Try me. Emma took a deep breath and recounted the events of the past 2 days, John's visit to the dealership, his unexpected behavior, and his offer at the cafe. Lisa listened intently, her eyes widening with every detail. Emma, Lisa said when she finished, her voice filled with awe. This is huge. I mean, I knew you were amazing, but clearly, other people are starting to notice too. Emma laughed softly. You make it sound easy. But I'm terrified, Lisa. What if I fail? What if I'm not cut out for this kind of responsibility? Lisa reached across the table, resting her hand on Emma's. You know what I see? I see someone who has always gone above and beyond, even when no one else was watching. John Carter didn't pick you by accident, Emma. He saw something in you, just like I do. Emma felt a swell of emotion but quickly shook her head. It's such a big leap, though. Leaving the dealership, stepping into a role I know nothing about, it feels impossible. Lisa tilted her head, her expression softening. The Emma I know doesn't back down from a challenge. You've already been making a difference in your own way. Maybe this is just the next step. Emma stared at her, the words sinking in. For the first time since receiving John's offer, a flicker of confidence sparked within her. By the time their lunch ended, Emma felt lighter, as if Lisa's unwavering belief had chipped away at the mountain of doubt weighing her down. That evening, she sat by her window again, the city lights twinkling like distant stars. She pulled out John's card once more, her fingers tracing the embossed letters. Finally, she reached for her phone and dialed the number. John Carter, his voice answered, calm and steady. Hi, John. It's Emma, she said, her heart pounding. Emma, he replied warmly. I was hoping I'd hear from you. There was a pause before she spoke, her voice steady despite the nerves. I've made my decision. I'm in. For a moment, there was only silence, and then John's voice returned, filled with a quiet satisfaction. I'm glad to hear that, Emma. You've just made the first step towards something extraordinary. As they began discussing the next steps, Emma felt the weight of uncertainty begin to lift. She still didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it head-on. The days after Emma's decision passed in a whirlwind of preparations. John's team quickly reached out, sending her documents to review and arranging her first meeting with the Carter Foundation. The foundation's headquarters, located in a sleek, modern building downtown, exuded an air of purpose and innovation. On the morning of her first meeting, Emma stood in front of the mirror in her modest apartment. She smoothed down the fabric of her blazer, the navy blue giving her a sense of authority she wasn't sure she fully felt yet. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her bag and headed out the door. When she arrived, she was greeted by a receptionist who led her to a conference room. The space was filled with natural light, thanks to floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. A large oak table sat at the center, surrounded by high-backed chairs. John entered moments later, dressed in a tailored suit that was sharp yet understated. He smiled warmly as he approached her. Emma, welcome, he said, extending a hand. Thank you, John, she replied, shaking his hand. Despite her nerves, she felt a sense of reassurance in his calm demeanor. As they took their seats, John gestured toward a man and a woman who had entered behind him. Before we begin, I'd like you to meet two key members of our team. This is Dr. Marcus Hill, our head of organizational psychology, and Sophia Reyes, our director of program development. Marcus, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a thoughtful expression, smiled and shook Emma's hand. It's a pleasure to meet you, Emma. John has spoken very highly of you. Likewise, Sophia added. She was petite but exuded a quiet confidence, her sharp eyes suggesting she missed nothing. We're excited to have you on board. Emma smiled, feeling a mix of pride and pressure. Thank you. I'm excited to get started. John leaned forward, his hands resting on the table. Emma, today is about orientation. We'll walk you through the Foundation's mission, our current initiatives, and the role you'll be stepping into. Take everything in, ask questions, and don't worry about knowing all the answers right away. This is a journey, and we're here to support you. Over the next hour, Marcus and Sophia presented a detailed overview of the Foundation's work. They explained how the organization partnered with companies to design and implement programs that fostered inclusive, respectful workplace cultures. Marcus emphasized the psychological principles behind their approach. The goal is to shift mindsets, not just policies, he explained. It's about creating environments where empathy and accountability are ingrained in every interaction. Sophia outlined the logistical side. We've developed customizable training modules, leadership workshops, and metrics to measure impact. Your role, Emma, will be to bring a fresh perspective to these initiatives and help refine them based on your experiences. Emma listened intently, taking notes and absorbing as much as she could. The scope of the work was vast, but she felt a growing sense of purpose. As the meeting wrapped up, John addressed her directly. Emma, I know this can feel overwhelming. But remember, you were chosen because you've already demonstrated the qualities we value. Trust yourself, and trust the team around you. Emma nodded, gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you, John. I won't let you down. John smiled, standing and motioning for everyone else to do the same. I have no doubt about that. Now, let me show you around the office. As they toured the building, Emma was struck by the energy of the space. The open layout encouraged collaboration, with clusters of employees gathered in discussion or working quietly at their desks. Inspirational quotes about leadership and integrity adorned the walls, alongside photos of successful partnerships the foundation had fostered. By the time she left that afternoon, Emma's nerves had transformed into determination. She walked out of the building with a clearer sense of the road ahead. That night, as she sat at her kitchen table, reviewing the materials Sophia had given her, she allowed herself a moment to reflect. This was more than just a new job, it was a calling, an opportunity to create real change. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The following week was a crash course in everything Emma needed to know. Her days were filled with meetings, workshops, and brainstorming sessions. Every corner of the Carter Foundation buzzed with activity, and Emma was quickly swept up in its rhythm. On Wednesday morning, she found herself back in the conference room, seated across from Sophia and Marcus. A whiteboard covered in flowcharts and bullet points loomed behind them, evidence of their collaborative efforts to refine one of the Foundation's new training programs. Sophia handed Emma a thick packet of documents. This is the curriculum we've been developing for mid-level management training. It's designed to address unconscious bias and build emotional intelligence. I'd love for you to review it and share your thoughts. Emma accepted the packet, flipping through the pages. She recognized some of the principles from her orientation but noticed a few gaps. It's thorough, she said after a moment. But I think we could incorporate more real-world scenarios. When I was working at the dealership, a lot of what I learned came from dealing with difficult situations in real time. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. That's a great point. Why don't you draft a few examples based on your experience? We can workshop them together. Emma hesitated, the weight of the task sinking in. Sure. I'll give it a try. Marcus leaned forward, his tone encouraging. Don't overthink it. Your perspective is exactly what we need, it's why John brought you on board. Just think of the scenarios that stuck with you and why. That evening, Emma stayed late in the office, her thoughts swirling as she typed out notes on her laptop. She revisited the moments that had defined her time at the dealership, the hostile customers, the dismissive coworkers, and the quiet victories that came from standing her ground. By the time she left, the city lights were glowing against the dark sky. She felt both exhausted and exhilarated, as if she were slowly uncovering a new layer of herself. The next morning, Emma presented her ideas to the team. She walked them through a series of scenarios: a manager dismissing an employee's concerns, a salesperson assuming a customer couldn't afford a product based on their appearance, and a team struggling to communicate across cultural differences. As she spoke, she noticed nods around the table. Sophia scribbled notes in the margins of her copy, while Marcus leaned back in his chair, smiling. Emma, Marcus said when she finished, this is excellent. These examples bring the curriculum to life. Sophia chimed in. You've captured the kind of moments that people will relate to, and learn from. Let's build these into the next draft. Emma felt a surge of pride. I'll refine them and send them over by the end of the day. After the meeting, John caught up with her in the hallway. Sophia and Marcus were raving about your input, he said with a grin. I knew you'd bring something special to the team. Emma smiled, a mix of pride and humility. It's still a lot to take in, but I'm starting to find my footing. John nodded. Good. Because I have another challenge for you. She raised an eyebrow. Already? I think you're ready, John said. There's a company we're working with, a medium-sized retail chain struggling with turnover and customer satisfaction. They've asked us to run a pilot of our program at one of their locations. I want you to be part of the team that facilitates it. Emma's heart raced. The idea of stepping into the field, representing the foundation, was both thrilling and terrifying. What exactly would I be doing? She asked. You'll observe their operations, interview employees and managers, and help deliver the training sessions. It's a chance to see the impact of our work up close, and to make a difference where it matters most. Emma took a deep breath. When do we start? John smiled. Next Monday. I'll make sure you have everything you need before then. As he walked away, Emma leaned against the wall, processing what lay ahead. Her journey with the Carter Foundation was no longer just about learning, it was about stepping into a role where her voice and actions could shape the future. Monday arrived faster than Emma had anticipated. The weekend had been a blur of preparation, with emails from Sophia outlining the pilot program schedule and resources from Marcus on how to conduct effective interviews. Emma spent hours reviewing everything, determined to make a strong first impression. That morning, she stood outside the retail store chosen for the pilot. It was a bustling location in a suburban shopping center, its wide glass windows showcasing mannequins dressed in the latest fashions. The parking lot was already busy, a sign of the store's importance to the community. Emma adjusted her blazer and walked inside, where she was greeted by the store manager, a middle-aged woman named Karen. Her handshake was firm but friendly, and her smile hinted at a mixture of hope and skepticism. Welcome, Emma, Karen said. We've been hearing about this program for weeks. I hope it can help us turn things around. Emma nodded, her voice steady despite her nerves. That's the goal. I'm here to listen, observe, and collaborate with your team to make the changes that matter most. Karen led her through the store, pointing out various departments and introducing her to employees along the way. Emma noticed the subtle tension in the staff's body language, the way some avoided eye contact or hurried through their tasks. This is our break room, Karen said, opening a door to a modest space with a table, a few chairs, and a vending machine. It's where most of our team meetings happen. Feel free to use it for anything you need. Emma thanked her and set down her bag, pulling out her notebook and a copy of the training outline. She had the morning to get a sense of the store's operations before meeting with the staff in the afternoon. Over the next few hours, Emma moved quietly through the store, watching interactions between employees and customers. She saw moments of genuine connection, a cashier patiently helping an elderly woman find her rewards card, but also moments of frustration, like a stockroom worker being chastised by a supervisor in the middle of the sales floor. By lunchtime, Emma had a list of observations and questions. She returned to the break room, where Karen joined her for a one-on-one conversation. So, Karen said, crossing her arms as she sat down. What do you think so far? Emma hesitated, choosing her words carefully. You have a team that works hard, but I sense there's a lack of communication and trust. Some of the tension I've observed might stem from unclear expectations or a disconnect between management and staff. Karen sighed, leaning back in her chair. You're not wrong. Turnover has been a nightmare, and morale is low. Honestly, I'm not sure how to fix it. That's why we're here, Emma said gently. The training sessions we'll run are designed to address those issues, but they'll only work if we involve everyone in the process. It starts with open dialogue. Karen nodded slowly. I'm willing to try. What's next? In the afternoon, I'll meet with the staff for an introductory session, Emma explained. It'll be informal, just a chance to hear their perspectives and start building trust. The session began in the break room at 2 p.m., with about a dozen employees gathered around the table. Emma introduced herself and explained the purpose of the program, emphasizing that her role was not to judge but to support. At first, the group was hesitant, their answers to her questions brief and cautious. But as Emma shared her own experiences from her time at the dealership, the atmosphere began to shift. I remember a day when a coworker dismissed a customer because of their appearance, she said, her tone candid. It was hard to watch, and even harder to speak up about. But when I did, it changed the way that coworker thought about their behavior. Small actions like that can make a big difference. One of the employees, a young man named Luis, raised his hand. Sometimes it feels like management doesn't care about us. We're just numbers to them. Karen, who had joined the session quietly, looked uncomfortable but didn't interrupt. Emma nodded at Luis. Thank you for sharing that. It's important to address those feelings. Part of what we're doing here is creating a space where everyone feels valued, from the stockroom to the front desk. As the session continued, more employees opened up, sharing their frustrations and ideas. Emma guided the conversation with empathy, ensuring everyone had a chance to speak. By the end, the room felt lighter, as if a small weight had been lifted. Afterward, Karen pulled Emma aside. That was eye-opening, she admitted. I didn't realize how much resentment was simmering under the surface. Emma offered a reassuring smile. The fact that they spoke up means they're ready to engage. That's the first step. As Emma left the store that evening, she felt a mix of exhaustion and accomplishment. The day had been challenging, but it had also affirmed the importance of the work she was doing. In her car, she jotted down a final note: people want to feel seen, heard, and valued. Start there. The next morning, Emma returned to the retail store armed with an action plan. The introductory session had laid bare the challenges ahead: disconnected leadership, low morale, and a team yearning for acknowledgement. She knew this was just the beginning, and progress would require patience, listening, and small, consistent efforts. Emma started her day in the stockroom, where she found Luis stacking boxes. His movements were efficient but robotic, his shoulders slightly slumped. Good morning, Luis, Emma said warmly, stepping closer. He looked up, surprised, then offered a small smile. Morning. Didn't expect to see you back here. I figured I'd check in and see things from your perspective, she replied, leaning casually against a nearby shelf. Yesterday, you mentioned feeling like management doesn't care. I want to understand what that looks like for you day to day. Luis hesitated, glancing around to ensure they were alone. It's little things, mostly. Like how we're always the last to hear about schedule changes, or how nobody ever asks us if we need help when we're short-staffed. It's like we're invisible unless something goes wrong. Emma nodded thoughtfully. That sounds frustrating. Have you ever shared these concerns with Karen or the supervisors? Luis gave a bitter laugh. What's the point? Nothing ever changes. Emma's expression softened. I hear you. But part of this program is about creating new ways to communicate, so voices like yours can lead to real change. Would you be willing to share these concerns in one of our sessions? I can make sure it's a safe space. Luis hesitated but eventually nodded. I'll think about it. Fair enough, Emma said, smiling. Thanks for being honest with me, Luis. It helps more than you know. She spent the rest of the morning shadowing employees in different departments, from the cashier at the busy front counter to the sales associate fielding endless customer questions. With each interaction, Emma listened carefully, jotting down notes and offering encouragement. By midday, it was time for her second group session. This time, Emma decided to focus on teamwork and communication. She arranged the chairs in a circle, creating a more inclusive atmosphere. As the employees trickled in, she noticed a shift in their demeanor. They greeted each other more openly, the walls of skepticism from the previous day beginning to crack. Karen joined as well, taking a seat at the edge of the circle. Emma began with an icebreaker, asking everyone to share one positive quality they admired in a colleague. At first, the responses were tentative, but soon the energy in the room shifted. "Luis always helps me when the stockroom gets overwhelming," a cashier named Brianna said. "He doesn't have to, but he does." Luis looked genuinely surprised, a faint blush creeping up his neck. "Thanks, Bri. I didn't know you noticed." "I notice," she replied with a grin. Emma seized the moment. "This is what I'm talking about. Recognition can make a huge difference, even for the smallest gestures. It builds trust and shows that we're paying attention to each other." As the session progressed, Emma introduced an exercise, a role-play scenario where employees acted out common workplace conflicts and brainstormed solutions as a group. The laughter and shared insights that followed made it clear that the team was beginning to bond in ways they hadn't before. By the end of the session, even Karen looked more at ease. "That was refreshing," Karen said as the employees left. "I didn't think they'd open up like that." "They just needed the right space and a little encouragement," Emma replied. Karen hesitated, then added, "You know, Emma, I've been managing for years, but I never realized how much of a difference these little things could make. Maybe I've been too focused on numbers and not enough on people." Emma placed a hand on Karen's arm, her tone reassuring. "It's never too late to shift focus. And the fact that you're willing to reflect on this shows real leadership." That evening, Emma reviewed her notes and reflected on the progress made. There was still much work to do, but for the first time, she could see tangible signs of change. Luis had agreed to participate in a leadership-focused exercise, Brianna had volunteered to help plan the next session, and Karen was starting to see the value of prioritizing people over policies. As Emma prepared for the next day, she wrote in her notebook, "Change starts with connection." The momentum Emma had built over the past 2 days was undeniable, but not everyone at the store was on board. As she arrived the next morning, Karen met her near the entrance with a hesitant smile. "Good morning, Emma," Karen began, her voice softer than usual. "I wanted to give you a heads up. Not everyone is thrilled with the changes." Emma tilted her head slightly, her curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Karen sighed. "Some of the supervisors feel like this program is undermining their authority. They're not used to this level of transparency, and they're worried it's making them look bad." Emma's mind raced. Resistance wasn't unexpected, but addressing it required tact. "I appreciate you letting me know. I'll make sure we address their concerns without diminishing their roles. It's important they see this as an opportunity, not a threat." Karen nodded, her expression a mix of relief and worry. "I hope you can get through to them. They've been here a long time, and change isn't exactly their favorite thing." Emma spent the morning observing the supervisors. She noticed subtle but telling behaviors, curt interactions with employees, dismissive tones when asked questions, and even outright avoidance of her presence. The tension was palpable, and Emma knew she couldn't ignore it. By midday, she decided to address the issue head-on. She invited the supervisors to a private meeting in the break room, framing it as an opportunity to share their perspectives. The group of 4 arrived, their body language guarded. One of them, a tall man named Steve with a no-nonsense demeanor, crossed his arms as he sat down. "So," Steve began, his tone sharp, "what exactly are we supposed to gain from this? Feels like all the focus is on the employees, and we're the ones being blamed for everything." Emma met his gaze calmly. "Thank you for being honest, Steve. I can see why you might feel that way, but I want to make something clear. This program isn't about assigning blame, it's about building a stronger team where everyone, including supervisors, feel supported and valued. Another supervisor, a woman named Denise, frowned. It's just hard not to feel like we're under a microscope. The employees are suddenly opening up about all their issues, and it's like they're forgetting how hard we work to keep this place running. Emma nodded, her voice steady. I hear you, Denise. Your roles are crucial, and I'm not here to diminish that. In fact, one of my goals is to highlight how important supervisors are in shaping the culture of this store. But to do that effectively, we need open communication and a willingness to adapt. Steve leaned forward, his expression skeptical. And what exactly are we supposed to adapt to? Empathy, Emma said simply. It's not about giving up authority or changing who you are, it's about leading in a way that inspires trust and collaboration. Employees are more likely to respect and follow supervisors who show they're willing to listen and understand their challenges. The room fell silent for a moment. Denise exchanged a glance with another supervisor, her expression softening. Emma continued, her tone measured. I'd like to propose a collaborative exercise. Let's sit down with the employees during one of the sessions and have an open dialogue, not as supervisors versus staff, but as teammates working toward a common goal. This could be a chance to address misunderstandings and build a foundation of trust. Steve's arms uncrossed, though his expression remained cautious. You really think that'll make a difference? I do, Emma replied confidently. Because change doesn't happen from the top down or the bottom up, it happens when everyone meets in the middle. The supervisors mulled over her words. Finally, Denise nodded. I'll give it a shot. Can't hurt to try something new. Steve hesitated but eventually shrugged. Fine. But if this backfires, I'm holding you responsible. Emma smiled faintly. I wouldn't have it any other way. The joint session later that afternoon was tense at first, with both supervisors and employees hesitant to fully engage. But Emma guided the conversation with care, encouraging each side to share their perspectives without fear of judgment. At one point, Luis spoke up, his voice steady but firm. Sometimes it feels like we're just numbers to you guys. Like what we say doesn't matter. Steve, to Emma's surprise, responded. I didn't realize that's how you felt. It's not what I want, but maybe I haven't done enough to show it. The small admission seemed to break the ice. Over the next hour, the room began to fill with honest dialogue and even moments of laughter. By the end of the session, the divide between supervisors and employees felt a little less wide. As the team dispersed, Karen approached Emma, her expression thoughtful. I don't know how you did it, but that was the most productive meeting we've had in years. Emma smiled, her own relief evident. It's a start. There's still work to do, but today showed that progress is possible. That evening, as Emma left the store, she felt a sense of accomplishment tempered by realism. The resistance she had faced was a reminder that change was never easy, but small victories could pave the way for lasting impact. In her notebook, she wrote, "Meet resistance with understanding, it's the bridge to progress." The day after the joint session, Emma arrived at the store to an unexpected sight, a few employees laughing and chatting with Denise near the front counter. The tension that had hung over the store seemed lighter, replaced by cautious optimism. Karen greeted Emma at the door, a hint of excitement in her voice. Morning, Emma. You've got to see this. Curious, Emma followed Karen into the stockroom, where Luis and Steve were working together to reorganize a cluttered shelf. Luis was explaining a new system he had devised to improve efficiency, while Steve nodded along, occasionally offering suggestions. Emma couldn't help but smile. Looks like progress. Karen nodded. I don't know what you said to Steve yesterday, but it's like he's a different person. He's been more involved and even asked for employee feedback on the new schedule. That's great to hear, Emma said. It's amazing what can happen when people feel heard. The rest of the morning unfolded with small but significant moments like these. Employees who had been reserved earlier in the week now approached Emma with ideas and concerns. Supervisors who had resisted the program began showing genuine interest in its goals. During lunch, Emma sat with Brianna and a few other employees in the break room. They shared stories about their experiences in the store, from frustrating customer encounters to moments of camaraderie. "You know," Brianna said between bites of her sandwich, "it feels good to know that someone actually cares about what we think. I wasn't sure about all this at first, but it's starting to make a difference." Emma smiled, her heart swelling with pride. That's the goal. Change doesn't happen overnight, but small steps lead to big strides. The afternoon brought a new challenge, implementing a feedback system that Emma had designed with input from both employees and supervisors. She gathered the team in the break room and unveiled a suggestion box in an anonymous online form, explaining how they could be used to share ideas, concerns, or recognition for colleagues. "Transparency is key," Emma said as she addressed the group. "Your voices are important, and this is one way to make sure they're heard. The feedback will be reviewed regularly, and we'll work together to turn your suggestions into actionable changes." There were murmurs of approval, and a few employees nodded enthusiastically. Karen added her own endorsement, saying, "I'll personally make sure this system is taken seriously. We're in this together." Later that evening, as Emma prepared to leave, Steve approached her near the exit. "Emma," he began, his tone less guarded than before. "I owe you an apology. When you first came here, I thought you were just another outsider trying to tell us how to do our jobs. But you've shown me that listening can be just as important as leading." Emma smiled warmly. "Thank you, Steve. It takes courage to reflect and grow, and I've seen that in you this week." Steve nodded, his expression sincere. "I'm not saying I'll get it right every time, but I'll keep trying." "That's all anyone can ask," Emma replied. As she drove home that night, Emma reflected on the past few days. The transformation she had witnessed wasn't perfect or complete, but it was real. People were starting to trust one another, to communicate openly, and to believe in the possibility of change. When she got home, she pulled out her notebook and wrote, "Progress isn't linear, it's a series of ripples that spread further than we realize." The next day brought a situation Emma had both anticipated and dreaded, a significant challenge to the progress the team had made. She arrived at the store to find Karen waiting for her near the entrance, her expression tense. "We've got a situation," Karen said, leading Emma toward the break room. Inside, Steve and Luis were in the middle of a heated exchange. Other employees lingered nearby, their faces a mix of concern and discomfort. "You don't get to just ignore protocol because it's inconvenient," Steve snapped, his arms crossed tightly. Luis shot back, "I wasn't ignoring protocol, I was trying to solve a problem. Maybe if you listened instead of micromanaging, you'd get that." Emma stepped forward, her calm presence immediately drawing their attention. "Steve, Luis, can we take a moment to regroup? Let's sit down and talk this through." The tension in the room was thick, but both men reluctantly nodded and took seats at the table. Emma gestured for Karen to stay, knowing her presence as the manager would be critical in resolving the dispute. "Okay," Emma began, her voice steady. "Let's start with the facts. Steve, can you explain what happened from your perspective?" Steve exhaled sharply. Luis went ahead and rearranged the stockroom layout without approval. "Now we're scrambling to find things during peak hours, and it's slowing us down." Emma turned to Luis. "Luis, what was your reasoning for making those changes?" Luis looked frustrated but kept his tone measured. "The layout was inefficient. We kept wasting time trying to reach frequently used items because they were in the back. I thought this new setup would make things easier." Emma nodded, acknowledging both sides. "It sounds like you both had good intentions, Steve, to maintain order and avoid disruptions, and Luis, to improve efficiency. But the way this unfolded created a conflict. Let's focus on how we can address this moving forward." She looked at Steve. What would have helped you feel more included in the decision-making process? Steve hesitated, then said, a heads up, at least. I get that changes need to happen, but I need time to plan and communicate those changes to the rest of the team. Emma nodded and turned to Luis. Luis, if you wanted to propose a change like this in the future, how might you approach it differently? Luis glanced at Steve, then back at Emma. I could have talked to Steve first, explained my reasoning, and gotten his input before moving things around. Emma smiled slightly, sensing the shift in tone. That sounds like a great solution. Communication is key here. If you both commit to keeping each other in the loop, I think you'll find a lot more success working together. Steve and Luis exchanged a brief look, then nodded. Fine, Steve said, his tone grudging but sincere. I'll try to be more open to changes if they're run by me first. Same here, Luis added. I'll make sure to clear things with Steve before making adjustments. Karen, who had been observing quietly, spoke up. I think this is a good step forward. Emma's right, better communication will help us avoid misunderstandings like this in the future. The group disbanded shortly after, the tension noticeably eased. Steve and Luis even exchanged a brief handshake before returning to their tasks. As Emma stood with Karen near the break room door, Karen let out a low whistle. That could have blown up into something ugly. You've got a knack for diffusing situations, Emma. Emma smiled. It's not about taking sides, it's about helping people see each other's perspectives. Most conflicts come down to a breakdown in communication. Karen nodded thoughtfully. If we can keep this momentum going, I think we'll see some real change here. That evening, Emma reflected on the day's events as she wrote in her notebook. Conflict is inevitable, but resolution is where growth begins. The following morning, Emma arrived at the store to find the atmosphere buzzing with unexpected energy. Employees were chatting near the registers, their expressions more animated than she'd seen before. Karen greeted her at the door, a knowing smile on her face. You've stirred up quite a bit of excitement, Karen said as she led Emma toward the break room. Excitement? About what? Emma asked, confused. Karen gestured to the table in the center of the room. On it sat a small plaque engraved with the words, "Teamwork makes the dream work," in recognition of outstanding collaboration. Luis stood nearby, fidgeting nervously with the edge of his apron. Steve was next to him, looking equally out of his element but determined. This was their idea, Karen said softly, stepping aside to let the two men speak. Luis cleared his throat. We wanted to thank you, Emma, for helping us figure things out yesterday. Steve nodded, his voice gruff but sincere. You didn't take sides, you helped us see where we were both coming from. That's rare. And it made a difference. Emma felt a rush of warmth as she glanced at the plaque. You didn't have to do this, but thank you. It means a lot. Luis grinned. Well, we figured it was time to start acknowledging good stuff when it happens. Like you keep telling us, recognition matters. Karen clapped her hands lightly. All right, back to work, everyone. But seriously, Emma, this wouldn't have happened without you. As the day progressed, Emma noticed other signs of progress. Employees were engaging with the new feedback system, and several had even left notes in the suggestion box. She read through them during her lunch break, smiling at the mix of ideas and positive reinforcement. One note read, Steve and Luis make a great team now. Who would have thought? Another said, thanks for listening to us, Emma. It's nice to feel like someone cares. Later that afternoon, John Carter arrived at the store unannounced. Emma spotted him near the entrance, speaking with Karen and observing the team. His presence was magnetic, drawing curious glances from the employees. John, Emma said as she approached him. I wasn't expecting you today. He smiled warmly. I wanted to see how things were going. Karen's been telling me good things. Emma gestured around the store. It's still a work in progress, but there's been a noticeable shift. The team is starting to trust each other, and the process. John nodded, his expression thoughtful. And you? How are you finding this experience? Emma hesitated, then said, it's challenging, but it's also incredibly rewarding. Seeing these small changes build into something meaningful, it reminds me why this work matters. John's smile widened. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. You've exceeded my expectations, Emma. I knew you had potential, but seeing how you've handled this. It's impressive. Emma felt a flush of pride but quickly redirected the credit. It's not just me. The team deserves recognition too, they're the ones making the changes happen. John studied her for a moment, then said, true leadership isn't about taking credit, it's about inspiring others to succeed. And you've done that here. Karen joined them, her eyes sparkling with excitement. John, you should see the feedback we've been getting. Emma's ideas have turned things around faster than I thought possible. John glanced at Emma, his expression serious but kind. I think it's time we talked about the next step. Emma blinked, caught off guard. Next step? John nodded. This pilot program has proven that your approach works. I want to expand it, bring you into a larger role at the foundation, where you can oversee similar transformations at other companies. Emma's breath caught. The weight of his words settled over her, a mixture of excitement and doubt swirling in her chest. John, that's a huge responsibility. Are you sure I'm ready for that? John placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Emma, you've shown me that you're more than ready. This isn't just about what you've accomplished here, it's about what you're capable of accomplishing moving forward. Emma looked around the store, her mind racing. The employees who had once been hesitant were now working together with newfound camaraderie. The supervisors who had resisted were beginning to embrace change. Taking a deep breath, she met John's gaze. Okay. I'm in. John's smile was full of pride. Good. Let's get started. As Emma watched him leave, her mind buzzed with possibilities. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, a chance to take everything she had learned and apply it on a larger scale. That evening, as she reflected on the day's events, she wrote in her notebook, growth begins with a single step, but transformation requires the courage to take the next. The next week felt like a whirlwind for Emma. After accepting John's offer, she was quickly immersed in meetings, planning sessions, and strategy discussions. The foundation's expansion plan was ambitious, targeting several companies across the country with similar challenges to the retail store she had just worked with. Emma's role was clear. She would oversee the development and implementation of customized programs, using her experiences to mentor local teams and guide them through the process of transformation. It was both thrilling and daunting, but Emma was determined to rise to the occasion. Her first major task was a presentation at the Foundation's headquarters, where she would outline the pilot program's success and propose a scalable model for future initiatives. On the morning of the presentation, Emma arrived early, dressed in a tailored navy suit that projected confidence. She carried a sleek portfolio filled with charts, feedback summaries, and photos from the store, a visual story of the progress they had made together. The boardroom was spacious, its glass walls offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. A group of Foundation executives and senior staff sat around the long table, their expressions a mix of curiosity and expectation. John introduced Emma with a few brief words, his tone brimming with pride. Emma Carter has demonstrated not only the vision we strive for but the leadership to make it a reality. Today, she'll share how her work can guide our future efforts. Emma stood at the head of the table, her heart pounding but her voice steady. She began by recounting her time at the retail store, weaving together anecdotes from employees, data on improved morale and efficiency, and insights from the feedback system she had implemented. When I arrived, the team was fractured, she explained, her tone measured but passionate. But with the right tools, communication, and trust, they began to see themselves as a collective force. The progress wasn't perfect, but it was meaningful, and it's proof that change is possible with the right approach. She clicked through slides showing before and after comparisons, employee engagement surveys, productivity metrics, and snapshots of team-building exercises. The room was silent, but the attentive expressions of her audience told her she had their full attention. Emma ended her presentation with a quote she had written in her notebook during one of her reflective moments: "Transformation is built on trust, fueled by communication, and sustained by a shared purpose." When she finished, there was a moment of silence before the room erupted into applause. John was the first to speak. "Emma, that was outstanding. You've not only demonstrated the success of the pilot program, you've shown us what's possible when we empower the right people to lead." The executives chimed in with their own praise, and Emma felt a rush of pride tempered by humility. After the meeting, John pulled her aside. "Emma, this is just the beginning. You're not just part of this foundation, you're shaping its future." Emma smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude and determination. "Thank you for trusting me with this, John. I won't let you down." That evening, Emma returned to her apartment, exhausted but exhilarated. She stood by her window, watching the city lights twinkle like stars, and thought about how far she had come, from a receptionist at a dealership to a leader in a movement for change. Pulling out her notebook, she wrote, "Every journey begins with a single step, but it's the courage to keep stepping forward that turns a path into a legacy." As she closed the notebook, Emma felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was more than a job, it was her calling. And she was ready for whatever came next.